VoyMonk video voice vlog. Uh, Yesterday I was talking about self-deprecating humor, and while doing that, I kind of was like thinking, I don't do any preaching or teaching or anything like that as far as here, but I do share my experiences and things that I've learned and known as far as through the years, specifically radio broadcasting, because that was the thing that I aimed to do when I was younger. And still, that's part of why I'm doing what I do today. The funny thing is, I was like, well, maybe I should, hit a few different key things about that experience, and maybe that could make for some interesting vlogging. I will say one of the things I found particularly funny, not only I've talked about things that you do in terms for effect and effect, when it comes as far your voice and the way that you sound and all that kind of stuff. Some people like to use heavy equipment, even though, if you use heavy equipment, to modulate and change your sound when people meet you in person, that's definitely going to have an overall effect on their experience. And what's going to happen when you don't have that equipment and you have to do remotes and stuff like that, and you actually have to deal with people. Some places, some circumstances, you don't always have the luxury of having a remote where you're going to have as many resources as you would with some other situations or radio stations and stuff like that. But anyways, point being is that I wanted to talk specifically about another phenomena that I experienced while going to radio broadcasting school was names, particularly coming up with your radio name. Now, understand this isn't necessarily a prerequisite. You don't need to change your name or come up with the name to be a DJ or radio announcer. I eventually would kind of understand this before I went to radio broadcasting school because I did internships. But it was kind of a thing. And, who doesn't want to have some cool radio name, because, hey, you're going to be this personality, which is another term for a character, right? And the thing is that depending on what kind of radio or announcing, or also they did stuff for video and TV and stuff if you wanted to do that. But point being is that when you did that, there was usually a reason to do that. Now, if you're going into like things like news or something that some people would consider more serious and, requiring a little bit more respectability, you probably are going to just use your actual name. There might be some reasons why you might not use a name, but generally that might have to do with depending on what territory or what area that you're working. Unfortunately, sometimes, because life sucks when it comes to sometimes prejudices and the way people behave, it might behoove you to maybe change a name if you're going certain places. But be that as it may, if you're in news on the radio, it's probably best to go with an actual name or one that sounds as realistic as possible. Radio DJs and disc jockeys on music stations did eventually kind of like adopt the same thing. A lot of the names that you hear on radio are absolutely not the real names, even though they sound like they're kind of fictitious, but they sound real sounding. The truth of the matter is that when it comes to radio, you really don't, I should say, when it comes to call signs, like in the military, but unlike in the military or whatever, you really don't pick your nickname. You don't really pick a name. Not so much. A nickname is something that's typically given to you by others. That whereby the very nature of what you're doing is a character for other people. So therefore, it's more about the effect that you're having on the audience rather than what you're trying to project on the audience, which typically and usually when you're starting out, you're not going to have that luxury. But be that as it may, what is, the fact is that when you come up with a name, understand that might be something that you have to stick with for a while. And like I said, and typically and usually the only real reason that you're going to come up with the name is generally because you're trying to protect your identity, because even though it was 20, 30, 40 years ago or even more, people that may not necessarily want to do some pretty awful stuff to you, it may not always be the best idea to use your real name. And I could say that whether that's radio or probably even today on YouTube, it's probably not a great thing. Although with the advent of the internet and some of the internet sleuths out there, it may not make a difference anyways. But I just thought that would be kind of an interesting little experience to share. That ran up my 5 minutes, man. Okay, that's going to be it. Until next time, take care.